This Saturday marks the 7th anniversary of the Sandy Hook school shooting in Newton, Connecticut. As many of you probably know, 26 people lost their lives in that shooting, including 20 young children. The shooter used an AR-15 style semi-automatic assault rifle and 10 30-round high-capacity magazines. That weapon and those high-capacity magazines are legal to purchase in Washington state. 4 years later, a teenager with an AR-15 and a 30-round high-capacity magazine killed 3 young Washingtonians in Mukilteo: Anna Bowie, Lake Long, and Jordan Ebner. Paul Kramer, the citizen sponsor of Initiative 1639, is here today. His son Will was seriously injured in that shooting. After that tragedy, we decided enough was enough. And at that time, I committed that I would do everything in my power as Attorney General to prevent more mass shootings in Washington state. If we do not take action, additional mass shootings will occur here. That is inevitable. And Washingtonians, if and when that happens, will demand to know why their elected officials did not act sooner. We're here today to announce a package of bills that I'm proposing to the Washington State Legislature to combat mass shootings. 2 of those are bills we've proposed previously, and 1 is a new bill. I'm very proud to be joined today by a large group, as you can see, of community leaders who support this effort and have been longtime leaders in the fight for common sense gun reform in our state for many, many years. I will not introduce all of them for obvious reasons, but we have representatives, for example, from groups like the Washington Alliance for Gun Responsibility, the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence. There it is. One of my favorite groups in the state of Washington, by the way. Washington Ceasefire, Indivisible Kirkland. Proud to be joined by Edmonds Mayor Mike Nelson. This coalition is strong and it is growing. I'm also proud to announce that for the first time, Governor Jay Inslee, a longtime supporter of gun safety measures, not just here in Washington state, but as a congressman representing Washington state, is adding his name to 2 of the 3 bills that we're proposing today. As you know, the governor is recovering from hip replacement surgery, so we wish him a speedy recovery. He regrets he cannot be here, but obviously is unable to be here for obvious reasons. Sonia Hallam from the governor's office is here today representing the governor. I'm also proud to be joined today by sponsors of these bills. You'll be hearing from 3 of them. Some of the elected officials who are here today include Senator Patty Kuderer, Representative Javier Valdez, Representative Strom Peterson. I believe Senator David Frocht is either here or parking downstairs and will be here momentarily, and Mike Pleciotti. You'll hear from a few of them shortly. So what I'm going to do is briefly describe the bills to you and turn it over to Senator Kuderer, will speak after me, followed by Representative Valdez, followed by Representative Strom Peterson, and then we'll take your questions. So what I'll do is I'll speak about limiting high-capacity magazines, banning the sale of assault weapons, and requiring safety measures around the sale of ammunition. Just one thing I want to mention before addressing those specific issues is there was a recent shooting in Dayton that received tremendous attention for obvious reasons. That shooting took 32 seconds. In those 32 seconds, that's all it took for an individual armed with a 100-round magazine and an AR-15 type weapon to shoot 36 people in Dayton. It took 32 seconds before he was killed by very brave law enforcement who risked their lives to save others. So he killed 9 people and injured 27 in just 32 seconds. Well, how do you do that? Well, you do that by having an AR-15 type weapon and a 100-round double-drum magazine. In Washington state, that same weapon and that 100-round double-drum magazine are perfectly legal to purchase in our state. I believe that this is the year, this upcoming session, is the year we will limit high-capacity magazines in Washington state. It will save lives. Limiting magazines forces shooters to reload, providing precious seconds for law enforcement to intervene and for victims to escape. During Sandy Hook, for example, 11 children were able to escape while the shooter was forced to reload from his high-capacity magazine. An analysis of mass shootings from 2009 to 2017 revealed that twice as many people die and 14 times as many people are injured when high-capacity magazines are used. It makes sense. It's a high-capacity magazine. In fact, whether a state limits high-capacity magazines is a single best predictor of the mass shooting rate in that state. Our proposal is to limit high-capacity magazines to 10 rounds. This is the year to get it done. I'm very grateful to Senator Couture and Representative Valdez for serving as the lead champions on this effort and appreciate Governor Inslee's partnership. Bill number 2, banning the sale of assault weapons. This will be a challenging bill for us to pass the legislature this year, but I'm going to give you 3 quick reasons why the legislature should pass this bill. First, compared to other firearms, an assault weapon is 7 times more likely to kill law enforcement. A study analyzing FBI data showed that 20% of the law enforcement officials killed in the line of duty from 1998 to 2001 were killed with assault weapons. Assault weapons are 11 times more likely to be used in a mass shooting than a handgun. When assault weapons or high-capacity magazines are used in mass shooting, more than twice as many people are shot. Just like high-capacity magazine limits, assault weapon restrictions have passed in multiple states. And I want to emphasize, for both limiting high-capacity magazines and banning the sale of assault weapons, court after federal court has upheld those laws, and the United States Supreme Court has allowed those laws to stay in place. They are common sense and they are constitutional. I want to thank Senator Couture and Representative Peterson for once again prime sponsoring these bills. Third, and this is a new bill for this coalition, I'm proposing Attorney General request legislation to strengthen state rules for ammunition sales. Despite laws that make it harder for dangerous individuals to access firearms, we know that guns obviously still end up in their hands. That's why we need safety measures to ensure that dangerous individuals who do not legally have the right to have a gun, for any number of reasons, do not enjoy easy access to ammunition. Right now, our laws don't do that. For example, 14 states prohibit violent felons and other individuals who are ineligible to have firearms. 14 states limit their ability to possess ammunition. It makes sense, right? If you're not allowed legally to have a firearm, you should not legally be able to get ammunition. Washington State is not one of those 14 states. That needs to change. Our laws do not, for example, prohibit dealers from knowingly selling ammunition to those who are prohibited from owning firearms, even though states like Louisiana and Texas do this. We're behind Texas when it comes to that requirement. Washington does not require a background check for an ammunition purchase. That needs to change. In Washington State, you need a license to sell cigarettes, vapor products, marijuana, alcohol, firearms, pharmaceutical drugs, insurance products, and fireworks. You do not need a license to sell ammunition. We propose changing that. If you are firearms dealers, your life doesn't change. You already have a license. But if you are a business that sells ammunition but not firearms, you are not required to have a license. That needs to change in Washington State. This new legislation, sponsored by Representative Amy Whalen of Kirkland, who unfortunately had a conflict over the noon hour. I believe she's receiving an award. She couldn't be here. She's our prime sponsor on that important new legislation. So that legislation will prohibit violent felons and others who are ineligible to own firearms from purchasing or possessing ammunition. That's an important first step. Number 2, it makes it illegal for dealers to knowingly sell ammunition to violent offenders and other individuals who are prohibited from owning firearms. Also, the bill will require those who sell ammunition to obtain a firearms license. And lastly, it will require background checks for all ammunition sales, and that will take place, and this is important, not to get too much in the details, but that will take place once the federal government expands access to what we call the NICS system that allows checks on ammunition. Under current federal law, and again, I won't get too much in the details, but under current federal law, the NICS system, by the way, is an acronym, NICS, for National Instant Criminal Background Check System. Right now, under current federal laws, NICS cannot be used to run a background check for ammunition. If there is a change in administration, that may well change. By passing this law, Washington would then be in a position to run background checks on the purchase of ammunition. These proposals will make our community safer. They are common sense, they are constitutional, and it is time to act on these common sense gun reform bills. With that, I'm going to turn over now to Senator Couture, who will be followed by Representative Valdez, who will be followed by Representative Peterson, and then we'll open up to your questions. Thanks again for being here. By the way, just before I turn over to Senator Couture and the other legislators, I just can't tell you how much I respect any elected official who's willing to put their name on a piece of legislation like this, okay? You're going to invite controversy by doing that. You'll get some letters from folks who have a different opinion, right? These legislators do not have to lead on it. They can say, you know, Bob, I'll support it, I'll vote for it, but I don't really need to be the prime sponsor on it. These individuals you're about to hear from are choosing not just to sponsor it, to be the lead sponsors, put their names on it, be the prime sponsors, to work to make these things happen, to make these bills pass. That's true leadership right now, and I just deeply appreciate all their efforts and their sacrifice and their leadership to make this happen. So with that, Senator Patty Kuderer.
Well, I want to thank you first, Attorney General Ferguson, for your leadership on this very important issue. Also, my colleagues who are here from the House, I want to thank them for their leadership. And also Grandmothers Against Gun Violence and groups like them. I've had the pleasure and opportunity and good fortune to be able to speak in front of some of these groups. And I know their passion. And quite honestly, it's their work that has really changed public opinion about common sense gun legislation, which from my standpoint is long overdue. Quite honestly, enough was enough at Columbine for me, and that was in 1989. Our country has been struggling with a major issue with gun violence. We have more guns in our country than we have people. And the ability for a legislature to pass common sense legislation has been really hampered in large part by shallow arguments and a lot of money, mainly from the NRA. But we've now broken through that. We saw with I-1639 that the people of Washington want common sense gun legislation. And you have leaders who are in the legislature and in the executive branch right now that are willing to deliver that for the state of Washington. A constituent said to me just a few days ago, a mother, she said she was concerned about her kids in school because they have active shooter drills. When I was in school, we had tornado drills. There's a big difference, and we don't even know the psychological effect on our young people of having to undergo active shooter drills. I want to change that. Everyone up here wants to change that because, as the Attorney General said, enough is enough.
Thank you, Senator Kuderer. My name is Javier Valdez from the 46th Legislative District. And actually, I do want to acknowledge my state senator who just arrived, Senator David Frock. So thank you for being here, David. As Senator Kuderer mentioned, you know, enough is enough. I think we've heard from voters, we've heard from our constituents that it's time for Washington State to act. You know, it's unfortunate that over the last 5 to 6 years, we've had 30 mass shootings here in our country. And I'll just briefly go over the sad reality and the sad stats. Newton, Connecticut, 30 rounds, high-capacity magazine used, 26 individuals lost. Aurora, Colorado, 100 rounds used, 12 deaths. Orlando, Florida, 30 rounds, 49 deaths. Las Vegas, Nevada, 100 rounds. 100 rounds, we lost 58 souls. Sutherland, Texas, 30 rounds, 26 deaths. Dayton, Ohio, recently, 100 rounds, 9 deaths. El Paso recently, 30 rounds, 22 deaths. And even here in our state recently, we've had two incidences in Burlington and Mukilteo. And it's been talked about. It's time for us to lead in Washington State. It's time for us to act to join 8 other states who have these limits, and it's long overdue. It's reasonable, and there are exceptions. You know, law enforcement will be exempted from this. Our military will also be exempted. So. We make sure that those protections are still in place. I'm optimistic that in 2020 session we'll get something done. The bill that I sponsored this in 2019 session was able to get it out of committee. Unfortunately, it still sits in Rules Committee, but we're coming back strong and we're coming back hard. And with all of the support here among my colleagues and all of our wonderful allies here, I'm confident that we can get it done. And with that, I want to introduce my friend and my colleague, Representative Strom Peters.
Good afternoon. My name is Strom Peterson. I represent the 21st District. I am proud that my mayor, Mike Nelson, is one of the leaders in our local communities when it comes to common sense gun reform, and that Paul Kramer, who is championing these issues, is also a constituent of the 21st District. I want to thank Bob Ferguson for obviously his leadership on this, but also for pointing out that this coming Saturday is the anniversary of Sandy Hook. And unfortunately, we could have had this press conference on any number of days throughout the year and commemorated another mass shooting. We could have done this in August and talked about Odessa, Texas, where 7 people died. We could have done this at the end of October, talked about Pittsburgh and the Tree of Life Synagogue, where 11 people were murdered. February 14th, Parkland, Florida, 17 people died. Early October, as Javier pointed out, Las Vegas, Nevada, 58 deaths. June, we could have talked about Orlando and the Pulse nightclub, 49 deaths. Or, of course, the end of July, we could have talked about my community of Mukilteo, where 3 were killed. The commonality among these places, despite the disparate geographic location, is the use of high-capacity magazines and assault-style weapons. So that's why we're here today. That's why I'm proud to stand with the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence, with my local elected officials, with statewide elected officials, with my senators, with my fellow representatives, to do something about this epidemic that's happening in all of our communities here in Washington and across the state. So thank you all for being here. And I don't know if Senator Frost might want to say a few words.
Dave, you want to jump in real quick? Yeah. Come on.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you for, I'll just echo what my colleagues have said. I'm pleased to be here under the leadership of General Ferguson and one of my great colleagues, Senator Kuderer. And I will just note, particularly on the high-capacity magazine issue, that the issue is the amount of lethal killing force that can be accomplished in a matter of seconds. That is why those magazines may be appropriate for military use, but they should not be on our streets. And that's why I support this legislation. I've supported it in the past as a sponsor, and I'm glad Patty's taking it on right now, and I look forward to working with this team and all of these great groups from the Alliance and Grandmothers and everybody to help us get it over the line this year. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And just a final thought before we take your questions. I think Patty Kuderer mentioned this, and we chatted about it. We were kind of gathering in a big conference room. We're all packed in there, and I mentioned that, when it comes to common sense gun reform, I say it all the time, but it's true. The people are way ahead of the politicians in this state. Not these politicians, obviously, right, but politicians as a whole. And look no further than Initiative 1639, right, raising the age to purchase an AR-15, for example, from 18 to 21. To require a background check on that weapon, the same background checks that we have for a handgun, to put that in effect as well. We proposed that bill to the state legislature 2 years running. The Republican-controlled legislature in Florida passed that bill, right? We could not get it passed in the Washington state legislature, despite having a governor willing to sign it. So what happened? The people, right, took it to the people through Initiative 1639, and over 59%, nearly 60% of Washingtonians passed Initiative 1639. That is overwhelming in this day and age to get that kind of support. So when I say the people are way ahead of the politicians, it's not an opinion, it is a fact. And I think that strong support from the people in Initiative 1639 will help fuel the support for taking these bills down to the state legislature. So that will start with questions here in the room. If folks are on the phone, which I think often there are, we'll see if folks on the phone have any questions. Anyone have any questions in the room here? This will be the easiest press conference I've ever had. A press conference on common sense gun reform, Mr. Rahman, nobody asked a question. That's we were so good on the upfront. So anyone on the phone have any questions they want to jump in on? If you do, if you just don't mind introducing yourself, would be great. Sorry, I'm going to turn you up. Sorry, I didn't quite. This is always dangerous. So I'm going to, Brown, do you mind just making sure I don't want to accidentally flip this thing off? Hang on just 1 second. I'm going to turn up so we can hear you. I think she said Cairo. Go right ahead.
Okay, it's Hannah from Cairo Radio.
Hi, Hannah.
And I just wanted to ask, was there some of these you've proposed before and had a tough time getting them done, obviously? Any particular reason you think you might have a better chance this session?
Sure. So I'll invite the legislators who are really experts to jump in with their thoughts as well. I think we've alluded to some of the reasons, so I'll just start with one or two, and others may want to jump in. I do think the strong public support for Initiative 1639 informs all elected officials precisely where the people are on common sense gun reform, loud and clear. Doesn't get much more overwhelming than that. So that's number one. Number two, like kind of any bill that's going to be a challenge, it often takes multiple years. That's just the way these things work, and you know that, and the legislators know that. And particularly with high-capacity magazines, as Javier said, We got through committees in both the House and the Senate, if I recall correctly, went to rules last year. We feel we have some momentum there, and perhaps I'll see if one of the other legislators want to add to reasons why they may feel optimistic that this year, as in the next legislative session, is the year we feel we have a good chance to get one or all of these done. Anybody else want to jump in? Go ahead, Senator. Introduce yourself on that.
Senator Patty Cooter from the 48th Legislative District. I also think we have new legislators. We have new leadership. And I think that also makes a difference. And again, hearing from the public, the amount of support that there is for common sense gun legislation now is really driving this. And again, I'm going to give a nod to Grandmothers Against Gun Violence and organizations similar to that. They have really put the wind in our sails, and they have stood up to organizations like the NRA that has so long had a strong stranglehold on legislatures across the country, and our federal government for that matter. So I think the time is now, and I think we're all cautiously optimistic because these are controversial bills. We know that. Nothing is ever a slam dunk. But we are dedicated. I've been working on common sense gun legislation since I got into the legislature, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon as long as we still have the need. Thank you.
Javier Valdez, 46th Legislative District. I too remain optimistic. I mean, obviously, again, as Senator Cooter alluded to, nothing's a slam dunk, but we have a lot of advocates who are out there every day championing this. And, in the House, we were able to get this out of committee. Our Civil Rights and Judiciary came this in 2019, and unfortunately did not get onto the floor. But I do remain cautiously optimistic because the chair of that committee will soon be our new speaker in our House, Lori Jenkins, and she has been a strong champion of sensible gun safety reform. And so I remain optimistic that she will stay that way and when she starts her term as speaker in January. And I certainly do all I can to making sure that I advocate with her as well as all of my colleagues in the state legislature to get this done.
Any other questions from those on the line before I come back to the room here?
This is Jim Camden from the Spokesman Review.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah. What would happen to the high-capacity magazines that are currently in circulation, and would you use the same definition of an assault weapon that 1639 uses, which is essentially all semi-automatic rifles?
Yeah, so on the first question, Jim, this bill does not sort of grandfather, it does not reach back and say, hey, it's illegal to possess either an assault weapon or the high-capacity magazine. So it would not be illegal to possess it if you had legally purchased it in the past. And on your second question, nothing in the definition that we have here would sort of conflict or require a 2/3 vote of the legislature based on Initiative 1639. So the definition we have, just to expand on that a bit, and we're happy to get you more information, Jim, but it's the same definition we've used in the past. It's essentially identical to other states that have passed those, and those have been upheld, and it would not require a 2/3 vote of the legislature if and when the legislature takes it up this upcoming session. Any other questions from those on the line before I give one last shot in here?
It's Jim Drew from the News Tribune.
Go ahead, Jim.
Attorney General, there weren't enough votes in the Senate for the high capacity magazine bill this year. If that's the same case next year, do you think there should be a roll call vote anyway so that the public can clearly know who's in favor and who's against it before the 2020 election?
Your question is getting applause here from the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence, just so you know. So I know we're there on it. I guess what I'll say is maybe 2 points, and I'll invite others to weigh in as well, who may or may not share this perspective. But a couple thoughts I have. Number one is I am 100% convinced that if the bill to limit high-capacity magazines gets to the floor of the House and gets to the floor of the Senate next year, it passes. I have zero doubt in my mind that if individuals are required to vote on it, it passes. That's number one. Number two, to your question, one thing I have frequently said as I proposed these bills in the past, and folks have heard me say it, probably these press conferences in the past as well, is, and goes right to your question, is I think the people deserve to know where their elected officials stand on these issues. It's a big issue. It's a high-profile issue. It's a public safety issue. It impacts our children, right? It's fundamental, and I think the people deserve to know where their elected officials know. The people know who these elected officials, where they are on it, right? They know where they know where I am. And to me, I think there are some issues that are so big, so fundamental, the people deserve to know. So, look, the legislators who are here are far more expert than I am at, hey, what's the right way to do these things? But I've always felt that they should be voted on for those reasons, and if there is a vote on the floor, that it would pass. With that, I will open up to any of my colleagues who might want to chat or discuss that as well.
Just say one.
Senator, go ahead.
This is Senator Patty Cooter from the 48th again. Jim, I would just say that the Senate always takes roll call votes. That's how we do it, unless it's an amendment, and then that can be on a voice vote. But there are times when we do division, or there's also a roll call for those as well. But if this bill gets to the floor and is voted on, there will be accountability in the Senate.
Any other questions on the phone? If not, last opportunity here in the room. Anyone have any questions here?
Someone back there.
I just had a point to bolster what all of you were saying, and that's just to mention the numbers of those who were injured but not killed, who sustained life-changing injuries during these mass shootings.
So the point is we made those who are injured, well, not killed, or injured in the obvious harm that's done there. And I guess one thing I just want to add to that before we wrap up, and then I think because we're getting a little bit early, we might be able to have a chance to do some one-on-ones here in the room. But Paul, where's Paul Kramer? Paul coming over. So Paul coming up. So Paul, Paul's someone who, after that shooting in Mukilteo, his son was at that gathering of young people, and to your question, right, that his son was injured and badly injured, and that. Well, I guess maybe I'll just with Paul, just if you want to say anything about that. I think Paul was a citizen sponsor of Initiative 1639, and I think was the person I reached out to after that shooting in Mukilteo, and really helped me get to the place I am in terms of proposing these bills and promising to propose them every year until we get them passed. So maybe the best way to close this press conference is with Paul to have a few words. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much for proposing this legislation. To the point made, there's great harm that's done beyond the loss of life. Those that are injured are changed for the rest of their lives, and the loved ones around those people are changed. That shooting in Mukilteo was absolutely heartbreaking, and not only to my family, but to the community as well. And it needs to change. It's gone on for too long. Yes, enough is enough. And this legislation can help to change things, can help to reduce the level of gun violence in our culture here in Washington State. It's time. Thank you.
So thanks all of you for being here. The press release is available. Feel free to follow up the team if you have questions. Thanks to each and every one of you for being here today and taking time from your schedules. We greatly appreciate your strong support. And we'll be available. We got maybe 15 minutes here in the room to answer one-on-one, but we should probably be clearing out by 1:15. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.